Hello and welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm here today with Beth Radcliffe and Jackie Powers, all of us from the Beebe Library. I'm Karen Stern, and as always, we're here to share with you some of the things we've been reading in hopes that we can find you your next great read. No real special announcements today, so I think we're just going to jump right in. We're doing some matchups today. Beth and Jackie have slightly similar thematic and time frame, so they're going to go together, and we're going to start with Beth.
Okay. So my book is Letters from Skye by Jessica Brockmore, and it's a historical literary novel of the letters exchanged between Elspeth, who's a waterphobic poet. Now, waterphobic, right? She lives on an island in Scotland, a remote isle.
They're very
right?
remote. All the Scottish
Yeah,
islands are very
right?
remote.
And so she's afraid of the water, and she's surrounded by it.
Okay.
So it's letters from her to David, who's a young man from Chicago, so Midwest America, right? It begins with a fan letter from David to Elspeth, because she's a poet. Brockmore combines setting and style and character development into a heart-rendering and heartwarming novel. The first letter was written in 1912, significantly 2 years before World War I. Elspeth is married to her brother's best friend and feels constrained by her husband. He's preoccupied and very contained. And also, she lives on an island, so she's also constrained by that.
Did she live on the island because of the brother? Is that where he wanted to live, the husband?
They all grew up together, actually.
Okay.
The best friend, the husband, and the
So they're all from it, right? Oh, because
all from there, yeah.
Okay.
And so she's never been off the island and is jealous because her brother gets to go, but
She doesn't want to deal with the water. Got it.
yeah. So David has practically no constraints. He comes from a well-to-do family, and he is a prankster, and he has passion, and he offers her a glimpse of the wider world, of a bigger life. And here's the significance of their letters. It allows them to be more expressive and vulnerable. Like if you ever talk to your kids and they're in the back seat, they'll be more willing to tell you what's going on, and you might be more willing to talk with them, which
You get the big revelations that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it.
I always like to do that. And that's sort of how therapy sometimes works, that you're not seeing the therapist, so it allows you more freedom. The other thing is that she, again, lives in Scotland, and he lives in the Midwest, and it's the early 1900s, so it's not easy to get from one place to the other. There's a quote from one of the read-alikes that I'd like to read. It's also done in letters, but I thought it expressed this well. You have made it possible for me to talk of things I have never spoken of before, and to understand what has been hidden. So the letter allows us into their interior world, their desires, their shame, their doubt, and their love. So Elspeth and David form a bond. And since Elspeth is a poet, her writing is just beautiful. Her descriptions of the landscape, her interior world, they're all sublime. And David, his letters are full of charm and good cheer, which is like him, and it's full of soul, again, like him. And the book is very meta. So that means that it's self-referential. So the book is going to be talking about books. And that's what they do in their letters. Talk about books, talk about poetry, talk about writing. So that's really fun to do that. The letters change over time as they fall in love and as the war progresses. And they have to deal with the infidelity and some of the brutality of the war. You don't see a lot of the brutality of the war because David becomes an ambulance driver. It's before the U.S. has entered into World War I. So most of it's told in a straightforward, linear fashion, starting with that very first letter. But occasionally it jumps forward in time to Elspeth's grown adult daughter and World War II. And she's writing to her best friend to lover, Paul. That allows the author to fill us in on what's happened with Elspeth, because the letters after World War I, David disappears. There are no more letters from Elspeth to David or David to Elspeth.
Oh.
So the daughter sort of takes up the mantle. She's trying to find out what happened in her mother's past. It's pretty much a quick read because it's all letters, even the long letters. And there's this wonderful tension because will they ever meet? Will they meet again? So that was really fun. So it's a charming book with some lightness, even though it takes place during World War I. It has heart and a hard-won happily ever after. So the read-alikes I got for this were first of all, let me tell you, I got 2 read-alikes, and they're both historical. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. One of them takes place during World War I, but they all take place in the UK. They all involve letters, and they're all meta, so they're talking about books within them. The first one, The Last Christmas in Paris, is by 2 authors, Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. And that one time jumps 2, and it also has a part that there's best friends, brothers, best friends. The other one, Meet Me at the Museum by Anne Youngston, that's where the quote came from. And that's also literary, and that's also love with a married person. And they're all romances, just so you know. So that's Letters from Skye by Jessica Brockmole.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's a wonderful read.
Yeah, it sounds like a good kind of escape back into time.
Yeah, not too harsh of a one.
Right.
Well, this is the same,
And
actually.
Jackie's got something similar.
This is the same. This was the Hazelbourne Ladies Motorcycle and Flying Club.
Wow.
By Helen Simonson.
It's very British sounding.
It's very British. So you'll recall Helen Simonson, possibly. Major Pettigrew's Last Stand was her first book. That was way back in 2010. I had to look about how long ago that was. She followed that in 2016 with The Summer Before the War, which I was saying earlier is on my list of things I read. I have no memory of it. But
Well, that doesn't say much for that one.
I know. For some reason, I remember being kind of like not as excited. But I did really enjoy Major Pettigrew, and while I couldn't tell you like exactly what that plot was about, I do remember really liking it, and I can tell you distinctly how it felt to read. And this latest one really does the same, even though the characters and the setting are different. Like Major Pettigrew, the tone of this is very kind of, it's gentle, but it's not cloying, it's not sweet. Her writing is very elegant, it's very descriptive, but it's not overwrought, it's not flowery. And also, like the first novel, this one confronts some complex topics, particularly classism, feminism, among others. And it's all within the context of this sort of very tender, romancy, love story, coming of age kind of tale.
So younger characters.
So they're young. They're all late teens, early 20s.
Oh, okay.
They're young. I mean, so a couple of them are a little bit older, but young. Primarily. So while Major Pettigrew was actually contemporary, you felt like it was the 50s, but it wasn't. This is the summer of 1919, just after the war has ended. We're in the seaside resort town of Hazelbourne. And the main character is Constance Haverhill, and she finds herself in this resort town as the companion to the elderly Mrs. Fogg. And there's always an elderly Mrs. Fogg. There's always an elderly Mrs. Fogg.
I love it.
So she has found herself kind of at loose ends. Her mother died from the flu epidemic, which was just after the war. And so when her time with Mrs. Fogg ends, when the summer is over, she's going to kind of have to figure out what to do with herself. So she doesn't really have a lot of prospects. She's a lot worrying. So a lot of that is just her worrying. But while biding her time caring for Mrs. Fogg, she meets Poppy Weirle, the daughter of the late local baronet. Poppy wears trousers. She has a motorcycle taxi service, and wants to provide flying lessons to women. She's kind of high society in this context. She's got an influential mother, so she gets away with this. Constance does not really get away with this.
Only the upper classes could get away with those things.
So Constance really kind of enjoys going along for the ride, but she's a little more reticent.
She goes along for the ride physically in the plane?
Not in, yes, in a plane, yeah. Definitely in the taxi. We also meet Poppy's brother, Harris. He was a pilot in the war. He lost a leg, and he is now literally and figuratively trying to find his footing in life. And that really is the theme of the whole book, is just coping with change. Everybody's trying to pick up the pieces after this war and get back to whatever normal is now, and everyone is struggling. So while everybody's kind of outwardly glad that the war is over, and they're like planning peace parades and such, everybody internally is kind of at sea without a lighthouse. There's a lot of people that, for the war gave them purpose. Yeah. For the women in particular, it gave them an autonomy and a freedom that they hadn't had before.
So much social upheaval.
Right. So there was a lot of people that were mixing that before had not, and now they're all kind of going back into their corners. So a lot of that freedom's being stripped away again. Simonson does a really good job of organically working people's backstory into the narrative without it being awkward or dragging the plot out. So even the secondary characters are really fleshed out and multifaceted and complex in a very short time. So I found this book to be kind of an escape, really. It's not that it's light. It's just such a different time and place that when you're reading it, it takes you right away.
It really takes you away.
It wasn't a better or worse place. It just transports you.
Yeah.
So I would recommend this to anyone who maybe just finished the Maisie Dobbs series, which wrapped up last year. If you find yourself a little bereft missing Maisie, as I do, this is a really good place to go. Maisie starts off, she obviously ends later in the late 40s, but it starts off right after the same time.
Right.
And the feel is kind of the same.
Okay.
Complicated topics
without being. That's great to have something to follow. We have a lot
of people who like Maisie Dobbs.
Yeah, and she'll be missed. But I like that she ended it. So
I have to put it on for my mother.
Yes. So World War I.
World War I. That we've done World War I.
Now we're going to go somewhere else.
We're going to go somewhere else, and now we're going to go to psychological thrillers. But really, I'm just going to call both of them scary things that happen in the woods, because that's literally. I'm going to talk two books here, and they are both along that, on that theme. So the first one you probably have seen on people's lists. It's The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. It's been on a lot of best of 2024 lists. And it's a police procedural, I guess you could call it, but there's a lot more to it than just that. It's also about children going missing in the woods, which it's not like that's never been done before, but she does do it very well here. And it's set in a summer camp and the surrounding woods in the Adirondacks, both in the 1960s and then particular time in the 1960s and then 1975. And full disclosure, I went to camp in the Adirondacks in the early 80s, and I can tell you she gets it very much right.
Wow.
This is very...
I thought this would speak to you.
Yeah, this totally spoke to me from that point of view. So because of I've mentioned several time periods here, there are time shifts in this one, and they are done very well. They center around two missing children. So one, a boy, Bear, which is weird because my other book is called Bear, but that's beside the point. Bear, who goes missing he's in the 8-year-old son, this is 1961, 8-year-old son of a very wealthy family called the Van Laars, who started the camp that this is all set in back in the early 20th century because they want to educate the masses about how to survive in the woods, as if they knew. But anyway, that
they hired someone who
knew how to do that. Yeah. The second disappearance happens in 1975, so 14 years later, and it is the 12-year-old daughter, Barbara, of the same family, the Van Laars. So who goes missing from the camp she's a camper. So they had a child and went missing in 1961, and then they had this other child who never knew her brother, the one that went missing, and she has gone missing in 75. So those are the two mysteries that we're learning about in this book. It's told mainly through the eyes of three young women. And there are other narrators, but mostly these people. Alice, who is sort of the poor little rich girl who's becomes the 18-year-old bride of Peter Van Laar III, and the unfortunate mother of the two children who go missing. And that's so there's a lot of trauma for her in her life anyway, coming into the marriage, but then of course a lot, and so some of the book centers around those issues. The second young woman is Judy, who her family laughingly call first in the nation, because she is the first in the nation female criminal investigator hired. She's the first of her kind to actually investigate crimes, and she is working on the case of the missing girl in 1975. And then the third main narrator is Louise, who is one of the only sort of working class camp counselors. A lot of these kids are fairly wealthy. They're probably on summer break, and they have this job for the summer. Louise doesn't come from that kind of a family. She comes from a working family, and she has the unfortunate honor of being the counselor for the cabin where Barbara goes missing, from which Barbara goes missing, the young girl. She also happens to be engaged to a wealthy young man, Louise does, who is friends with the Van Laars.
So how she got the job.
Which is how she got the job at the camp in the first place. So there's all these layers, right? There's the haves and the have-nots, for sure, and how they interact and don't, and things they know and don't. There's things about women, because there's Judy with this, first in the nation job, right?
Yeah, everybody's patting her on the head.
Yes, and all the men she works with who are always patting her on the head. And there's the mysteries, obviously.
Right.
And then there's the jumping time frames, right? And then you might expect, and there's actually a few other characters. There's the man who's accused of the first disappearance. He gets a couple of chapters, and there's a serial killer lurking in the woods who gets a few chapters as well. So there's all this stuff going on, and you're jumping around in time, and you might think that was a bad thing, but she just does it really.
It's very organic.
She does it so well.
At all like jerky.
Nope. And one of the things that I really loved about it was she gives you a timeline. And now I'm trying to find it. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but across the top at the beginning of a chapter, it gives you all the possible timelines. But the one that you're in is in bold. So this one says this one says 61, and this one says winter 1973, June 1975, blah blah blah. So and the one that you're in, nice. So when you turn the page into a new chapter and you're thinking, where am I going next? So there's something about it. I thought that worked really well.
It was
clear. Helpful.
Yeah.
And then so she's through all these times she's layering on all the clues and the red herrings and the things that are happening to the characters, and you're getting this really seamless build up for the mystery. The Adirondacks are definitely a character in this book. You get this sense of beauty, majesty, danger. There's definitely a sense that you don't want to get lost in these woods, and there are a lot of secrets that the woods hold. And that is a really important part of this book. And when she does well, she definitely knows the Adirondacks. And in this book, there are secrets. Actually, my notes are over here. So there are secrets too, but maybe not quite as secret because guess what? It's a bear. There's a bear. It's a grizzly. It's turned up on San Juan Island off the coast of...
Another remote island.
Yeah, another remote island. San Juan Island off the coast of Washington State, right? There's that group of islands there. And bears don't usually come to San Juan. This one, it was seen swimming across, and it appears. And it's, as I said, a grizzly, which is also not common. And it's definitely making itself felt on the island. It's sort of raiding people's chickens and things like that. This one is also a story of kind of working class folk who serve the wealthy. This time it's two sisters, Sam and Elena, or Elena. And Elena works as a server at a golf club, and our narrator, Sam, she works on the concessions on the ferries that ferry the wealthy tourists around. She based this loosely, Julia Phillips based this loosely on that fairy tale by the Grimms, Snow White and Rose Red.
Yeah.
Which is that really, I hadn't thought about it in years, and apparently it really stuck with her from when she was really little. And it's where there's this, these two lovely little girls and their lovely mother, and they live in the woods all happily ever after. And this bear comes along, and they just invite it in, and it lies by the fire, and they tickle it, and they love it. And eventually it turns into a prince after a troll or something. But anyway, this one isn't quite as happy. It's Sam and Elena live with their mother in the woods for sure, and but their mother is dying slowly and painfully, and so that's awful. And the family has money troubles because of her medical bills. There's been an abusive boyfriend of hers in the past that has caused quite a bit of trauma. COVID also hit, and meant Sam was out of a job. So there's a lot of trouble in this family. And Sam's only dream is that when her mother goes, excuse me, she and Elena will just be able to escape the island and live like what she thinks of as being a normal life, away from all these nasty rich people and the abusive men and the bears and all this stuff. So the tensions begin when Sam and Elena have really different reactions to this bear when it arrives. It literally arrives on their front doorstep. And so where Moore's book is this kind of straightforward mystery, very traditional, with the detectives and the clues and the red herrings and all this stuff, Bear is much more, I would say, psychological in the fact that it's an internal monologue. But it's not told in the first person. It's told in the third person. So you're getting like Sam did this and Sam did that. But it takes you a while, because it's in the third person, to realize that you are only getting her point of view. And so the turmoil that she's feeling, and at first you think this is real, this is all real, and then you start to realize
you're only getting Sam's,
only Sam's point of, but it's still
okay.
So it's like a third person omniscient narrator of this one person.
Okay.
So it took me a while to go, oh, I'm dealing with an unreliable narrator here.
Got it.
And this is she does such a good job of making you feel really tense, because Sam has got a lot of frustrations in her life, and she's kind of angry, and you're hearing all this stuff, but it's all kind of at this weird distance. Anyway, so the mystery isn't a traditional mystery at all in that one. It's more that the red herrings are coming from this sense that, maybe I guess it's more about you as the reader sort of figuring out what you need to believe and what's true and what's not true, and just kind of moving through that until the book comes to its kind of horribly inevitable climax.
So it's a mystery? But what's the mystery? You can't really say.
It's mysterious. Let's put it that way.
Okay. It's not horror, right?
It's not quite horror, but it
feels like it has hints of it.
Well,
there's times when it feels
fairy
like
tale element.
Yeah.
it's right. Grimm's, Grimm's are grim,
Yeah.
right? And it's that fairy tale element. It's a sort of not quite fantasy, because nothing really magical happens with the bear exactly, but there's an element of this of mystery to the bear.
I think there's a magical.
Did you read it too?
Yeah, Beth read it too.
I think there's a bit of magic with the bear.
Sort of.
I don't think there's supposed to be, but I have to believe there is.
So anyway, there's these little but again, it's really hard to know what's real and what's not, because all you're getting is Sam's very tense narrative. and one-sided narrative.
Now you got me. I'm like, is the bear representing?
The bear is
something?
the bear is absolutely representing a whole bunch of things, absolutely, and it's also the catalyst for a ton of action in the book. Like it's the reason things happen. So that's the reason that the bear is the title. I have a couple of read-alikes for these. So for God of the Woods, I would say Ton of French.
Yeah, that's what I was
the,
thinking.
The very first one,
Yep.
In the Woods, is
Yep.
a really good read-alike for
Yeah.
this. Very similar, like atmosphere to the book.
Yep.
And I would also say maybe not so much the rest of the Dublin Murder Squad ones, but her last two, The Searcher and the Hunter, I feel like have a similar feeling to them too, and a similar kind of.
There's kind of an insider-outsider thing.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. So I think Ton of French is very good for this. I mean, honestly, this one would be good for anybody who likes a psychological thriller because it's a good one and it's just well written.
I don't even like. I've kind of walked away from the thrillers a
Yeah.
lot, but I loved this.
Yeah, no, I thought this was just really well done. I'm not a huge thriller
Yeah.
person, but or that kind of thriller. I just anyway. And then for Bear, I would say this is a hard one to find a read-alike for, but I would say her other book, which I think I talked way back, which is called Disappearing Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also set in a remote, another remote. It's not quite an island; it's a peninsula, but it's Kamchatka. And there's a lot of mystery in the woods there too, and a similar kind of storytelling on some level. So if you liked that one, you'll probably like this one. Although I found this one even more disturbing. I think, like.
Is it one of those that you finish it and you just can't stop thinking about it because it's
Yeah, a little bit. A little
keeps
bit.
kind of unfurling a little bit more in your mind.
A little bit. I think I would read it again. I found myself in the middle much more disturbed by it than at the end. Like the end was satisfying.
Okay,
I was happy with the ending. I mean, it was right. I'm not saying it was all good or whatever, but it was happy or satisfying. It was more the middle that really riled me up because I was so caught up in Sam's way of thinking. That was tough in some ways.
Interesting.
Yeah, good books.
Give that one a try.
Yeah. So I think that's all we've got for today. But we will be back next month, and we will have more great books to suggest to you, and we hope to see you then. For now, that's Book Buzz. Thanks a lot.